Reading for years 3 and 4, week 7, and this is lesson 3. Today's lesson focus, we will be reading chapter 4 of Fantastic Mr. Fox. You'll be focused on developing your inferencing skills and answering questions based on the text. We will also have our Vipers focus at the end of the lesson. Today's learning objective is to develop inferencing skills based on a text. Your success criteria, I can infer by asking questions. I can also answer these questions independently, and I can even justify my answers using evidence from the text. Let's look at some of the vocabulary from the text that we will be reading today. And our first word is goon. Have you heard of this word before? And what does it mean? A goon is a fool, someone considered silly, stupid, or criminal, who is paid to hurt people. And a sentence example. The goon was babbling on to the man ahead of him about his latest conquest. Our next word is reek. What does reek mean? Reek is to have a strong, unpleasant smell. And here is a sentence example. Her breath reeked of garlic. Murky. What does murky mean? Murky is when something is dark and dirty or it is difficult to see through. Sentence example. She gazed into the murky depths of the water. And our final word, tattered. What does tattered mean? Tattered is when something is in bad condition. And our sentence example, she was dressed in a tattered coat. We will now read chapter 4, The Terrible Shovels. Down the hole, Mrs. Fox was tenderly licking the stump of Mr. Fox's tail to stop the bleeding. It was the finest tail for miles around, she said between licks. It hurts, said Mr. Fox. I know it does, sweetheart, but it'll soon get better. And it will soon grow again, Dad, said one of the small foxes. It will never grow again, said Mr. Fox. I should be tailless for the rest of my life. He looked very glum. There was no food for the foxes that night, and soon the children dozed off. Then Mrs. Fox dozed off, but Mr. Fox couldn't sleep because of the pain in the stump of his tail. Well, he thought, I suppose I'm lucky to be alive at all. And now they found our hole. We're going to have to move out as soon as possible. We'll never get any peace if we... What was that? He turned his head sharply and listened. The noise he heard now was the most frightening noise a fox can ever hear. The scrape, scrape, scraping of shovels digging into the soil. Wake up, he shouted. They're digging us out. Mrs. Fox was wide awake in 1 second. She sat up, quivering all over. Are you sure that's it? She whispered. I'm positive. Listen. They'll kill my children, cried Mrs. Fox. Never, said Mr. Fox. But darling, they will, sobbed Mrs. Fox. You know they will. Scrunch, scrunch, scrunch went the shovels above their heads. Small stones and bits of earth began falling from the roof of the tunnel. How will they kill us, Mummy? Asked one of the small foxes. His round black eyes were huge with fright. Will there be dogs? He said. Mrs. Fox began to cry. She gathered her 4 children close to her and held them tight. Suddenly there was an especially loud crunch above their heads, and the sharp end of a shovel came right through the ceiling. The sight of this awful thing seemed to have an electric effect upon Mr. Fox. He jumped up and shouted, I've got it! Come on! There's not a moment to lose. Why didn't I think of it before? Think of what, Dad? A fox can dig quicker than a man, shouted Mr. Fox, beginning to dig. Nobody in the world can dig as quick as a fox. The saw began to fly out furiously behind Mr. Fox as he started to dig for dear life with his front teeth. Mrs. Fox ran forward to help him. So did the 4 children. Go downwards, ordered Mr. Fox. We've got to go deep as we possibly can. The tunnel began to grow longer and longer. It sloped steeply downward, deeper and deeper below the surface of the ground it went. The mother and the father and all 4 of the children were digging together. Their front legs were moving so fast you couldn't see them, and gradually the scrunching and scraping of the shovels became fainter and fainter. After about an hour, Mr. Fox stopped digging. Hold it, he said. They all stopped. They turned and looked back at the long tunnel they had just dug. All was quiet. Phew, said Mr. Fox. I think we've done it. They'll never get as deep as this. Well done, everyone. They all sat down, panting for breath, and Mrs. Fox said to her children, I should like you to know that if it wasn't for your father, we should all be dead by now. Your father is a fantastic fox. Mr. Fox looked at his wife and smiled. He loved her more than ever when she said things like that. We are now ready to start our Vipers learning activity, and this will focus on chapter 3 and 4. So you might want to look at the text again from yesterday, chapter 3, to help you. V for vocabulary. So what word shows that Mr. Fox doesn't respect the farmers? Can you find a word that means arrogant? And what phrase shows that Bean is impatient? What does glumly mean? I for infar. Why was there no chance of the farmers being smelled out? Why does Mr. Fox sniff the air before leaving his hole? How does Mr. Fox spot the gun? And why is Mr. Fox glum? Why was there no food that night? P for predict. Can you predict what will happen in chapter 5? E for explain. How does Roll Dark create tension in chapter 3? What does Mr. Fox want for tea? Why do they need 2 ducks? What does Mr. Fox decide was rustling? What gets shot off? What do farmers decide to do instead of waiting? Why does Mr. Fox know he can outrun the farmers? And S for summarise. Summarise what happens to Mr. Fox in less than 30 words. Scenery. Draw the scene of the farmers in their mechanical diggers next to the crater they have dug and create a range of captions that could be used for that image. Reflection. How well did you do today? Did you manage to cover all of the success criteria? Well done, everybody. Great work today.